Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 13th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Zoom virtual meeting of the Cohasset Planning Board. I'd like to do a roll call. Clark Brewer.
Brewer here.
Tom Callahan.
Here.
Paul Grady.
Present.
Eric Potter. Amy Glassmeyer here. Paul Caleri. All right, then we're 4 people for this evening. Ms. Lind, would you like to provide some insight as to how the meeting will go?
Absolutely. So for members of the audience, my name is Lauren Lind. I'm the Planning and Zoning Director. We're going to go through 3 public hearings tonight. Each item on the agenda will have a designated public comment period. At the time that's appropriate, we'll go to public comment. We do ask that you engage the board through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We ask that you leave your name and address. You can leave written comments. You can state that you just like to speak to the board on a certain item. At that time, when appropriate, we'll promote you to panelists that you can use your camera and microphone feature, and we'll ask you to state your name and address for the record before you insert your comments. With that, I'll turn it back to the board.
Thank you. So as for how the meeting will unfold tonight, Mr. Grady will introduce each one of the public hearings. At the time that each individual public hearing is introduced, I would ask that a single person from the applicant's community identify who will be speaking and the order of the presentations. After that, we will hear from peer reviews where they have been built for the town. And then we will move to the planning board members themselves for comments. Then we will open up the discussion for public comments, and then we will return to the planning board members for additional discussions. So with no further ado, Mr. Grady, would you please read the first public hearing?
Sure. Lauren, could you put that up for me?
Yes, give me one moment.
Thanks so much.
No problem. Let me make this a tad larger for you. Better?
Yep. Ready to rip?
Ready?
Notice of public hearing, Cohasset Planning Board. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40-A and 300-5.12 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the Planning Board will hold a virtual public hearing on the Zoom platform, webinar ID 858-7173-9424. Password 184733 on Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. for a site plan review for property being shown on Cohasset Assessor's Maps F5-32-018, 46 Border Street, Cohasset, Mass. 02025. The application is for a site plan review for a renovation of the existing restaurant function buildings to accommodate a combination of restaurant and retail uses, including a lobster pound, bakery, and public access areas. The application is being submitted by Co-Lobster LLC, care of attorney Adam Brodsky. A copy of the application plans and accompanying documents are on file in the town clerk's office on Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, with office hours of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Electronic copies of said application can be obtained by contacting Planning Director Lauren Lind via email at lind@cohassetma.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should access the virtual meeting at the time designated. Signed, Amy Glassmeyer, Chair, Planning Board.
Excuse me, Ms. Chairman, person. That public notice referenced the 305.12 in the Cohasset zoning bylaw in the introduction, and that section doesn't exist under Chapter 5. I think that the intent is for site plan review, which is 12.6, 300-12.6. So I would let everyone know that reference was incorrect.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. That will be noted. I recognize Mr. Brodsky as a potential representative, but what I would like to say first is that I'd like to know, to begin the discussion, where the project's conversation has been in front of other boards before we begin. And then you may begin.
Can I just, I need
just
to
a
make
minute.
I just need to make a disclosure that I'd like to make before.
Yes, Mr. Callahan.
All right, just for the record, Ms. Hoadley has been a client of mine recently to handle things for her parents' estate. I don't think that presents a conflict of any sort for this project, so I don't intend to recuse myself, but I think it's necessary that I disclose that.
Thank you very much. That was very appropriate. So, Mr. Brodsky, are you representing the applicant? Ms. Lynn?
Sorry, I was going to speak to the question you had before about which other boards had seen the site.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So just for the members and the public benefit, this project is also filed with the Cohasset Zoning Board of Appeals for the use permit portion. This is not a special permit under the planning board. It's simply a site plan review. And in addition, there's review under the Conservation Commission for the jurisdiction near the wetlands.
All right, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Mr. Brodsky, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is very nice to see everyone again. My name is Adam Brodsky, and I represent the applicant Co Lobster LLC. Tom Sullivan is the manager of Co Lobster, and I'm just going to speak briefly and provide an overview, and then turn the matter over first to Darren Grady, our registered professional engineer. And if you would promote Darren Grady, I'm not sure I've seen him. And then we'll be turning the presentation over to Susan Hoadley, our architect. Just to round out the development team, I want to introduce Eamon O'Mara, who is the project manager with Harbinger Development. Obviously, Ms. Hoadley and her partner, Corinna Martinez, are our architects. Darren is our professional engineer. Co Lobster purchased this property in 2021. I'm not going to spend much time describing it to you. You're likely very familiar with the former Atlantica restaurant. The property is located within the waterfront business and floodplain and watershed protection districts. The existing restaurant function building was constructed in 1948, and while not necessarily relevant to site plan review, the lot is conforming, but the building and the parking use are non-conforming. We're proposing to improve and reconfigure the building to accommodate a smaller fine dining restaurant, a second smaller restaurant, coffee shop, an ice cream store, a bakery, and a lobster pound. The idea is to relocate the lobster pound from its present location at 82 Border Street to this building, and to provide significant additional public areas. The project actually reduces the restaurant use that presently exists on the property. And as if you've been in Atlantica, you'll know that there's no real access to the harbor unless you're a patron of the restaurant. And as Darren and Susan will explain, we're actually creating opportunities for the public to get to the harbor through the reconfigured building without obviously being a patron of any of those uses. We believe that the proposed uses are far less intensive than what is existing on the property, particularly with respect to parking demand. I won't go into the statistic for parking. We have those available to you, and I'll defer to Darren on that. We're proposing to improve the parking lot to provide actually conforming parking spaces. The present layout of parking is non-conforming, and we're going to make those parking spaces conform to current zoning and providing landscaping where none effectively exists. Importantly, and I'm just trying to get ahead of an issue, with respect to parking, and again, more of a zoning issue than a planning board issue. On our site plans, we show some proposed parking spaces within the layout of Border Street. Those are not being counted towards any of the parking calculations. We had a pre-application meeting with the town, and it was simply suggested at that point that we show what the town could potentially do to improve parking on Border Street, but those are not part of the project because they are off-site. And as a result of that pre-application meeting, we based all of our parking calculations on guidance we received, and our parking calculations conform to that guidance. Briefly, the project is not going to result in a substantial improvement under the state building code, so we're not required to come into compliance with current flood hazard construction requirements within the state building code. As Ms. Lind mentioned, we have an application before the zoning board for various special permits, a special permit for the restaurant and retail uses, which need to be authorized within the waterfront business district, a special permit to alter the non-conforming building, although, as you'll see, again, not particularly relevant to planning, all of the changes to the building are located outside of the non-conforming setbacks. So those portions of the building within the non-conforming setbacks are not changing, except with respect to the front of the building, which is actually being pulled out of the setback. And so the building will be more conforming than what presently exists. We need a special permit to alter the non-conforming parking use and a special permit for alterations of the building within the town's floodplain district. As Ms. Lind indicated, we did open that public hearing and we received input from the zoning board, including with respect to parking. And we're in the process of evaluating the zoning board's comments, and we will be responsive to that. We have a notice of intent pending before the Conservation Commission. And I would just note that the Conservation Commission voted to have Weston and Sampson, the planning board's peer review consultant, review stormwater in connection with both the notice of intent as well as the request for a stormwater permit. We're grateful that we have Weston and Sampson's peer review comments in its April 6, 2022 report. I would like to pose a question to the board or to Ms. Lind. When do we expect the peer review comments on stormwater from Weston and Sampson? Because it may be prudent to wait to get to those comments before we provide a formal response to Weston and Sampson's planning board comments. But in any event, we can get to the mechanics of that whenever it's appropriate. So with that, hopefully brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Darren Grady, our engineer, to give you an overview of the site plan, please.
Thank you, but I'd just like to make one point, which is we now have 2 Gradys at this meeting, and so it would be useful that whenever anybody wishes to speak to one or the other, that they use their first name and their last name. Thank you. So, Mr. Darren Grady.
Thank you. Can I share my screen?
You may, sir.
Can everyone see my screen?
We can see it.
Great. So this is the existing conditions over at 46 Border Street. The site's area is 65,200 square feet approximately. And the property line starts along Border Street here. And if you follow my cursor, it comes down all the way to this property line here where it heads out to mean low water. This dash line here is the rear property line, also mean low water. It comes along here and then returns back in here, and there's a little kink in the property here. The site consists of an existing building. It's shown in hatch lines here, and also a parking lot. The parking lot has 52 spaces shown here, with each one counted with a bubble. They're both non-conforming and conforming, but they're all striped. We did count these as far as the 52. There's a sparse amount of landscaping in with the building and these little islands, as well as the stone monument. The building is served by water, gas, electric, and sewer. And the site has an existing catch basin on it here. There are existing catch basins in the street as well that runoff from this site currently go to. There's one here, one here, one here, and also one here. The setbacks for the existing building are non-conforming in the rear, shown here at 1.2 feet, as well as the front is 13.3 feet. This is the proposed plan. We are proposing to remove this section of the building, and that 13.3 feet goes away and becomes 24 feet to the closest point at the front setback, conforming. The proposed work as far as site includes a landscape island shown here. The dark line around this represents a saw cut line because we're removing impervious pavement there, or impervious pavement. And it also represents erosion control as that work is being done to control construction sediment from leaving the construction area. This dark line here also represents saw cut and erosion controls. This is for some walkways that are proposed. Walkways here are shown as recycled brick. This is crushed seashells, more recycled brick, and more seashells. There's a proposed fence that's shown over here. This fence will encompass existing dumpsters, this existing electrical transformer, and also it's the loading area. It's the old salt house. This loading area will be maintained in the proposed conditions. A new loading area for the reconfigured building will be in this area here. We're proposing 28 parking spaces, 2 handicap accessible spaces here. We're proposing a bike rack and an electric car charging station here. We did submit a stormwater report. Here is the catchment plan. We have 7 design points. This being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is 7. There's a reduction in peak rate runoff and also volume for design points 2, which is here, 3, which is here, and 5. Design points 1, 4, and 7 remain the same. The reduction in impervious material is approximately 4,500 square feet on the site. With that, I'll turn it over to Susan to discuss the building improvements.
Before you do that, Mr. Grady, is there a way that you can unpack this site plan? It's very difficult to see the layers that are in this image. So you're looking at small items that are clearly at another level. And I'm just wondering if not now, but I'm sure we might see each other again, that you would produce for us each layer of different usage of the land so that we can see things independent of one another.
Could you give me an example?
So basically, you have certain things that you're changing, but we really can't distinguish them between all the other things that are going on here. If you were to say, we're going to do parking first, we're going to do removal of things second, we're going to do adding things third, then we would be able to see how you're building up your project.
Okay. There's very little change to the existing conditions here, and that's one of the nice things about this site. The changes all were encompassed within that saw cut line, besides the utilities that are on here.
It is, you're correct, but when you look at this, it is very difficult to distinguish uses, changes, And it would just be much easier if we had individual layouts of what's happening so that we can be good and informed on your behalf.
I will do my best.
Madam Chair, this is Adam Brodsky. Some of that information may be forthcoming with respect to the architectural plans, but I will work with Mr. Grady and the project team to be responsive to your concerns.
Thank you, I
But
appreciate that.
there are a series of plans that are related to the site design, including ones that focus on landscape, natural landscape elements like plants, that one in particular, that may be hard to see if you have a small screen.
Okay.
There is a lighting plan. You saw that lighting plan. Those are separate site plans that have those issues covered, as well as the paving and grading plans, which would be typical. So not all of the information is all packed onto one drawing. There's a series. If you open up the file off of the planning board's website webpage, you can poke through those and get a flavor for what's going on with the different types of elements.
Right, and all I'm doing is asking that that be presented so that the public can also see what's going on.
Well, he could do it right now. Show the landscape elements in the front of the building. Show the zoom in a little bit so anybody looking on a small screen can see what's going on. There's a fair amount of landscape elements and planting elements there. And also the site lighting plan shows a photometrics where the goal is always to have a point O at the property lines for site lighting.
There were 3 lights proposed on this, one here, and one here. With the electric-
I'm not asking you to do this in real time. I'm just indicating that the next time we work with you, it would be helpful to have things more easily represented so that we can do the best job we can for you.
But it doesn't hurt for them to do it right now. They have
No,
all
it's
the
true,
information
but I'm
and
just
post
saying,
it.
I don't want to, it's a pressure issue in terms of what they had to plan for. All right, well, so let's move on to Ms. Hoadley.
All right. May we share our screen?
You may.
Okay. Is everyone looking at EX 101?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
good.
You got it.
All right. Well, good evening, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Susan Hoadley, and I'm here with Karina Martinez, and we are from Hoadley Martinez Architects. We are doing the design work on the building portion of this project. And the primary thing I'd like to open with is the fact that the goal from the very beginning of this project relative to the building was to just to take the big assemblage that is known as Atlantica and divide it up into spaces that are smaller, better, more useful, and divide it up into a feeling and a flavor that's more in keeping with Tower Wharf when it was a series of Village Wharf buildings, as opposed to the large complex that has sort of consolidated and knitted together over time to become what we know as Atlantica. If you look at EX 101, these are the existing conditions of the building itself. And Ms. Glassmeyer, I appreciate your comment that we bring buildings, that we bring drawings that are more explicit in their individual layer, and we will do that the next time as well.
Thank you.
So here's the drawing that we have of the main level plan as it exists now, that everyone knows well. It's a large single-purpose event space that's configured to basically serve the 2 settings that it delivers right now, which is at capacity crowds or sitting dark and empty. There is 1 point of entry in the front, which and the rest of it essentially poses a wall to the public and the community. There's no access to the water beyond the parking lot. and there's no public accommodation or access at most times. Each one of these points, I hope, will be addressed as I go through our proposal for the building. So I would like now to go to EX 102, which is the second floor. Most people don't even know that that's up there, save for a couple of little telltale dormers, but it is actually filled with rooms right now. And it is basically a rabbit warren of borrowed space for wedding prep. And with the assumption that most of the mechanical was once up in this attic and has now gone out onto the flat roof. It is basically pushed all the mechanical out onto the roof. And we're hopeful that if we reclaim these spaces, we can put any new mechanical that we need to put out on the second floor up, buried up into the building itself with attractive vents and louvers. The second floor, we are also proposing to effectively scoop out the second floor and cathedral ceiling for a new fine dining restaurant below. So with that said, I'll bring you right to our proposed plan. And our proposed plan is color coded. The purple represents food and dining. The yellow represents shop and retail. Orange, which I think is probably the most exciting part of the plan from an architectural point of view, is a new open walkthrough, so that whereas before you encountered a locked door, most times of day, the public would be able to, and I'll have Karina move the mouse, go up through a new open air walkway, which ends in an open air covered area, which then leads to the existing dock. So you have the new opportunity then to begin from the parking lot and walk all the way out to the marina, out into the water. We're hopeful that you can see that this new planning approach creates smaller and better spaces that respond to the scale of the tower wharf, which was there earlier in the century before this was knitted together into the mega complex. And one of the most interesting accommodations that this plan gives you is new public restrooms. I think everybody here is probably familiar with the existing Atlantica restrooms. We're proposing to put those, to leave those as is with a bit of renovation and let the public, as they are using the harbor walk and other harbor accommodations, even if they don't have to do with Cohasset Wharf, can use the can use these bathrooms in a public capacity. Next. This is the roof plan. And while this could be more, I think, could warrant some improvement graphically, what it does show you is that the open air walkway that's cut away really opens this building up and gives you the feeling that there are discrete sections of it instead of one mega complex. We've also, to give you a description of the new scope of work, in the roof plan, the vast majority of the project is re-roofing and the addition only of the dormers above the new restaurant point, or the new restaurant space, a new roof over an entry to the restaurant, a new cupola, which will signal the entry to the complex, and a new configuration to the area on the corner, which will provide a covered porch with steps on it that can be that's welcoming and can be occupied by people who are doing the harbor walk as well as people who are using the wharf. Over on this side, I will add that we have a new gable roof, but that other than those additions, the height, scale, and mass of the entire complex remains the same with selective additions and effectively a 35% space reduction. Here are the elevations. I'll go one by one. We'll start on the south. So this is what you would see when you drive up to the wharf from Border Street. These are shown before and after. Good. The schematic at the top shows the general configuration of the existing Atlantica building. And what we're showing below it is the new proposed work, which going from the salt house at the left over is as follows. The salt house would stay the same because it's out of the scope of work. But then once you get over to the area that used to be the big, the area that Darren described as being removed and moved back, this is simply right now this is envisioned as a wholesale operation for Cohasset Lobster. And they will bring deliveries into essentially this minor loading dock, which is windowed, so light to beyond. And then as you move over, you get sort of almost a general store feel retail establishment with 2 doors and a columned porch around it. This area then to the right is the open air walkway. The entry to the restaurant that you see is way back at the end of the walkway. The new element that's proposed where the sign is here is just a new cupola marker to signal retail and other elements that'll lend vitality to the complex. We've kept the lighthouse base intact, as have we kept the porthole windows in the existing restrooms intact. We've looked at providing a community bulletin board, which could hold a large graphic. I've been speaking with members of the Cohasset Historical Society who are compiling a new signage program for the entire harbor, and they are interested in placing one of their stations at this point, which could have some more elaboration in the form of graphic materials that talk about the unique history of Tower Wharf. And then moving over to this area, we have an entry to what we are envisioning to be a coffee shop, where you could go in and sit in those pointed areas that everyone knows well as being beautiful places to look out onto the harbor and beyond. The next elevation is the east. This is the elevation that is seen from the water near the sailing club looking east. And we are proposing to take the big relentless plate glass windows that are in the existing Atlantica, and we are, because those are fixed and we are looking to be more passive and sustainable, we would like operable windows there, but they have to be safe. So they are 2/2 traditional units whose upper leaf will be operable to admit passive breezes and the wonderful sea breezes that come off of the ocean into the restaurant area. This part is completely open to the harbor. It will be filled with picnic table style tables, and if it serves the restaurant, and it will just be a place that is full of vitality and a way for people to get from Border Street to very robust points of enjoyment to the harbor. If you remember from the plan, this is where the this is the point at which the gangway begins down to the actual dock. And just to keep things moving, because there's a lot. This is the water side from the north. And this would be, it's essentially very similar, but cleaned up. You have the window program that I just described, a simple sign with downward pointing lights. You can see how open the wharf becomes. And I think that the look of the building on the harbor will, because of its sort of finer articulation, will not appear as large and monolithic. And finally, moving to the west elevation, where you would be coming from the hotel / new condos down Border Street. This is what you'd see. Old Salt House, providing the familiar anchor, and then our architectural improvements to the outside of the new restaurant. These drawings are sections, combination sections and elevations. And I like them because they really tell the story of how the community can begin at the present entry point, walk up a gentle ramp, either underneath the porch or in the open air, much like Stagecoach Way in Cohasset. Here in Cohasset Works, you can walk under a covering, or you can walk out in the open air, but you are brought to a waiting area for the restaurant, which would have another graphic that speaks to localities such as the big, beautiful tower map that's in the Historical Society. And then on the opposite end, going down to the next drawing, you just see the other side of that, where we'll show you where the inside of the restaurant is. It's right here. And then you have open air from the open air walkthrough out to the covered wharf beyond, and then entry into the retail and the new bathrooms. This page shows our architectural approach. We are dedicated to working in materials that we have worked in either in our office successfully in the region before, or calling on regional details such as the ones at the Hull Life Saving Museum, which is in the upper right-hand corner, which is a favorite building of mine. Nearly all of the examples in this on this page are go-to details that our office uses and has used locally and can be toured and shown to anybody who would like to see what they look like in real life. Okay. And finally, the rendering. This is a conceptual rendering that is not meant as much to elaborate the landscape approach as the actual architecture. And we're hopeful that what it shows is that much in the way that we transformed the sailing club from being something that turned its back to the public and turned into something that really welcomed everyone in, literally and figuratively. We're doing the same thing here. We're saying that we're creating signals to the public to come in, to use it, that your journey out to the dock is one that belongs to the community, and one that's welcoming instead of closed. And here's the back. I am probably most interested in conveying how transformational it will be to get actual open air space for the community to come in and actually sit, enjoy one another and look out onto the harbor while they, while they partake of the opportunities that we have here as a community. So for that, I will.
Thank you, Ms. Hoadley. That was a nice presentation. Is there any other individual of your group that is expected to speak?
No, Karina Martinez is here. She is here for technical support, but not anticipating a presentation.
All right, then thank you. Is there anybody else from the applicant group that wishes to speak now? All right, if not, then I would ask that our peer review now takes the stage. So Mr. Daran Kurjangian.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Madam Chair. I'll also share my screen here. Apologies for that delay. Yep, so we are, I'm Darren Kirshman from Weston and Sampson, a senior project manager. We have done a peer review of the 46 Border Street application on behalf of the Cohasset Planning Board. As mentioned, our initial memo was submitted on April 6th. And this presentation provides a highlight of some of our findings. So our review criteria were the Cohasset, the bylaws, some listed here, as somewhat clarified today. The site plan application, the special permit activities are being performed by the zoning board. So those activities which are referenced in some of the applicant's documents are not part of our review. So our review topics included parking and circulation, the site plan layout and bylaw compliance. We did have a street view. I think we've seen a lot of the graphics of existing and proposed locations. Just one item to note is this loading area or dumpster area actually currently that we'll be revisiting in our comments. So to again highlight some of our topics and items of that we've requested some additional clarification now that the applicant has reviewed our memo. We will, I'm sure, have a dialogue and discuss beginning that additional information. One item that was already discussed was the parking and the non-conforming numbers of parking spaces that we'll further detail. It ties into the parking calculations as well as pedestrian access to this area and plans for either sidewalks or other pedestrian access. Then we'll discuss our site plan layout review, and finally some of the stormwater, which dovetails also into there's planning board jurisdiction of stormwater items, as well as what the CONCOM, which was also highlighted by the applicant. So beginning on the parking calculations, we just did want to highlight 28 off-street parking spaces are proposed in the new parking lot configuration. The dimensions of the parking and the drive aisle widths are in compliance with the town bylaws. The number, as the applicant has noted, are less than that which is required, which is in the 40 range versus 28. The applicant has, I guess, clarified today that those off-street parking, or sorry, the on-street parking on Border Street, which are shown here and here, are not included in their calculation, and further not planned for their construction, but maybe a recommendation for the town to add. Just to flag as well, there is parking at the old salt house that is being eliminated from this project. So another question we had was, because of the old salt house and the proximity to this development, it's a abutting building with similar uses. The parking was while separate, there's some overlap in parking. So we were wanted to flag sort of how the planning board would view the Old Salt House use and parking requirements. If that was included in the calculation, 5 additional spaces would be needed. And there is some reduction of parking that's occurring in front of the Old Salt House. As the other Darren had mentioned, the property line does jog out here. So it is part of this 1.5 acres of 46 Border Street, and 44 Border Street is not part of this site plan application. However, there's adjoining and abutting uses, it appears, of parking. So we want to just clarify that question. Actually, sorry, before I leave this page too, another element of the parking was a calculation of parking, included a mixed use. And we just wanted to flag that, how that's defined. So there's going to be restaurants. I think there's a lot of additional and very beneficial information from the applicant of the public use, which is greatly clarified. And I think we'd want like additional documentation on that, and that's sort of a separate comment. But it was initially unclear to us how this was mixed use, as there's like the lobster pot, and then restaurants and cafes, which all had like a food distribution or food service versus the retail is also food related. So there was a question, but it appears, and I don't want to speak for the applicant, but the public use is where the mixed use is coming in. So we want to clarify that with the applicant as well, and I have highlighted because the use of mixed use changes the parking demand requirements versus just like a standalone restaurant or standalone cafe according to the bylaws. So while I did note on the parking that the sizing and drive aisle widths are in compliance with the bylaws, this driveway width where it encounters Border Street is actually wider than allowed. So we did just flag that. It may be it's consistent with what's currently there, but it is wider than what is allowed, which is 24 feet. We've discussed this item a little bit, but just to further flesh out those 8 parallel parking spots that are proposed by the applicant for construction on Border Street itself. We had questions of, and the site plan wasn't clear on sort of the existing striping and location of certain features on the road itself, and then both the lane and shoulder width. That ties into some of our comments that we had about pedestrian safety and sidewalk use. And then just to circle back on that loading item that I had noted. So currently there's dumpsters which are in a fenced enclosure. Those are accessible. It appears with that loading dock, they'll remain accessible, but we just wanted to clarify with the proposed reconfiguration of some parking, how the dumpster enclosure will be accessed and used for the property going forward. And then moving into the sort of the meat of the site plan layout review under section 2, and these, I guess just to clarify, these items that are in parentheses tie back to our peer review memo. So we're looking for clarification on the public areas. I think we got a very good description today. I think some additional documentation on that would be beneficial of the public use of some of these restrooms and covered walkways. I think also we had recommended signage to make it clear what's public or what can be used by the public. I don't think it would be, especially with the past uses, the Atlantica restaurant is a sort of a only patrons of the restaurant were using that property. If there's a change where there's significant now public use, which is a great benefit to the town, having signage that's clear would be a suggestion. Then moving into the natural resources and erosion controls, which are tied together. We were seeking additional clarification on what environmental protection procedures are going to be used during construction. As the applicant has noted, this is on Cohasset Harbor, a sensitive area that would need to be protected during construction. And then tying in the stormwater report was not available to us during our peer review. We do have a copy of that now for the Concom review. And I mean, it also ties into the planning board review. So we did not have that at the time we'd requested it, and we now do have the stormwater report to include in our peer review. So the last few items, we do have a recommendation just with the parallel parking that's proposed and the additional, especially with the added public use of this area, to have sidewalk along the frontage, a 5-foot curbed sidewalk for pedestrian safety, so that pedestrians can safely traverse this area. And then the last 3 items that we highlighted were sort of related to constructability. I think some of the drawings that were shown today also are later versions than the February set that we were reviewing. So we were looking for some additional details on those drawings with proposed gradings, utilities, and also sort of the construction sequencing that the chair was mentioning. With the selective structure demolition, we wanted to just also verify what the public protection will be during demolition. And the Mass DP requires a hazardous building material inventory for renovation of or just demolition of buildings with the AQ06 permit. So we wanted to verify that that would be submitted. And then lastly, we had, based on the zoning of this site, the Cohasset Master Plan calls it Atlantica property subject to Chapter 91. I think there was some discussion in the applicant's setup of the project that based on the work that they're doing, they're not subject to the Chapter 91, but we didn't want to revisit that because it's specifically called out based on the waterfront location as a Chapter 91 site. That was our peer review. So take questions or yeah. Paul.
All right, thank you very much for the
A quick question, follow up.
My hand's up, Clark.
minute.
So why don't you hold up?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Well, we were going to go in
Yeah,
alphabetical
yeah.
order anyway, so Mr. Brewer would be going first.
Well, I just had a quick follow-up question for our peer reviewer. You had said that the entry and exit aisles, the curb cuts, if you will, were wider than the 24 feet that's in the zoning bylaw under section 7. And I didn't realize that there was a maximum for a curb cut. Could you direct me to that reference?
Yes, so that's 1.13 of our memo. So let me just pull up the exact. So it's from 300-7.3 C dash or C3. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers and letters, so I'll repeat that. 700-7.3 C.3, which notes that no entrance or exit driveway shall exceed 24 feet in width for suitable radius.
Except for a suitable radius. Got it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brewer, would you like to begin the discussion?
Well, I was just following up with the peer reviewer, but I'm happy to start unless Paul Grady wanted to ask the peer reviewer something specific as a part of his flow.
No, I actually wanted to backtrack and ask Ms. Hoadley, since we seem to miss that part of the discussion, a couple of questions, but I'll wait. Since Amy, you want to open up the discussion according to the way you want to open it up, please.
Thank you.
Okay, then, yeah, I'm happy to make some comments. I mean, I would say that what is proposed here is really amazing. I really think it's going to be the greatest thing for Cohasset to break up this this mega event hall hogging all the half of the waterfront and make it a place where the public can go, where there's different things to do and different things to places to go, where it's opened up, where the massing is broken up in a way that's like a small scale, in a small scale way like you in like many New England towns. The architecture design of the towers and the kind of 1890 1910 the naming of it, of Cohasset Wharf. I just think that the team has done such a great job, even giving up space and opening up to the public and having public bathrooms. Public bathrooms will have to be managed in some way, but I just think that what was put together is what I imagined what for the Harbor Village concept overlay district at the Cove. Now we got mega buildings at the Cove site, but this is exactly what I had imagined could work and be successful at the Cove. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and the good news is it's not too late because this is an excellent concept. The details are worked out. They're quality materials, but they still have an aspect of fun to them. So that I think that they're serious. It's not blue vinyl awnings for pizza shops. This is a real classy waterfront concept. I will ask Susan on the roofing. You have lead coated copper, and I know that lead coated copper can
No. It,
can leach.
Yeah.
I haven't asked the question. Can leach the lead into the ground or groundwater? I have seen zinc coated copper,
yes.
which has antibacterial qualities, and it can react a little bit more quickly in a saltwater environment. But I've seen real zinc last for 100 years in historic buildings. So I guess one recommendation I would say is investigate using zinc coated copper instead of lead coated copper, because we know what lead does.
So we are planning to specify Rhine zinc standing seam product, which has a lead coated copper look finish. But yes, I agree with you that we don't
But
use actual lead.
But it's actually it's zinc. I mean, I'm familiar with Rhine zinc, and it's a zinc coated copper. In fact, I've used it for my kitchen counters. So you can make a sandwich on it. It actually kills bacteria. People use copper on their roofs to cut down on mold and moss and things like that. So it's an absolutely appropriate selection, and the other exterior materials are superb. So I'd say you guys have hit it on the park. Now the parking might be a hang up where you looks like you're right at your requirement for parking with the Salt House at 52 spots. I mean, I like the fact that you've pulled the parking off of the building, but I wonder if you could do a one-way loop and maybe diagonal parking and pick up some more spots, because this place is going to be so popular. People are going to have to park all the way in the village and then walk down, and then they're going to trip on the sidewalks and blame us for not endorsing the connection. But that would be my only suggestion in terms of what is designed and proposed, is to look at an alternative layout for a one-way in and out, and perhaps diagonal parking to pick up some more spots. Those are my comments.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Mr. Grady?
Ms. Holy, let me compliment you first on your presentation. Extremely well thought out, and it's an attractive piece of property. I have just 3 concerns. First, parking. Border Street, as we all know, is extremely narrow, and I'll dovetail into that. So you may want to look at that, and Clark had some excellent points. Another one is handicapped accessibility. I noticed that you spoke about a lot of the seashells and clamshells. I do know at the Chart House, you really cannot get a wheelchair over to the Chart House as it is with the Crest lot, and also the removal of the handicap spots that were actually there prior to. So, and trying to get a wheelchair over onto the pier is next to impossible. You just can't do it. And I noticed that in your presentation, you said you're going to be using more ground shells. How do you propose to fix that for handicapped people? And my last one, and then I'll leave it to you, was I was under the impression that there's going to be a boardwalk going all around the back of the building. I saw that, I thought, in an earlier iteration. Yet we don't see that now. And I see the enclosed porch and the pier, so I'll leave it. I know that's probably a conservation thing. I do think that where the boats are drawn, that's very low water at low tide, so you may have some issues with some boats sitting in the mud.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
because I've sat in that mud before in mine. But it's more the walkway going around that I thought was part of the plan. You know, the connectivity part. It's a very attractive building, but I'm more concerned with children or kids getting hurt going up and down Border Street, be it using the bridge or anything along those lines, which is kind of a rite of passage in Cohasset, and or bicycles and cars and things like that. So I do appreciate what Clark said. It'd be something you may want to look into, the boardwalk, and more importantly, for the people who just want to take, who might have someone who has a disability or handicap in their family, to get across those clamshells. And again, you cannot eat at the chart house as it is even now.
Thank you. That we share your concern, and at our next presentation, we'll show you what that path of travel looks like.
Is that the boardwalk or is that the handicapped accessibility?
Handicapped accessibility. Moving into the boardwalk question. We did have schematic plans in very early stages for the boardwalk to go all the way around the site. As you know, we're bumping up against a lot of constraints that's keeping us from building on the water's edge. And what we're trying to do is create a project that's as much of a renovation project and being very selective with new construction. That said, it's a very, very important thing to get people through here and around and along the water's edge, Mr. Grady. I completely share that goal and that hope. So in beautiful weather, when the restaurant is being used, it will actually be possible to take that route if you walk through the restaurant. Otherwise, what our approach is that you would be able to walk in and down to the marina and back. But it's true that we haven't proposed an outrigged boardwalk to connect those two pieces.
And Mr. Grady, this is Adam Brodsky. I just want to clarify that the gangway and float as seen on this depiction is not in its exact location. This is simply done for illustrative purposes because those elements are not part of the project. Those are subject to separate permits and licenses and need to be put back in its location as already approved. So I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Brodsky. That was just an observation on my part. So yeah, again, Ms. Holdley, I would double back and is on the parking, on the streets, and those would be my main concerns. Again, I think you did an outstanding presentation, and thank you. But it would be nice to see that open air concept that's been talked about for the harbor renovation since I think it began. You know, we've got the condos going in, and that's supposed to have a boardwalk going around it and then moving up and around, and just ease of flow, and might reduce some dangers inherent in a busy area to especially children or people trying to drive through.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grady. Are you finished?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Callahan?
All right, thank you. Looking at section 12.6 and the criteria we have to make a decision on under section B, I would agree with everyone else that under item 1, the harmoniousness of this and the design is fantastic. I think this is a great looking project compared to what's there. Criteria number 2, I don't think is going to apply. 3, 4, and 5 all have to do with the stormwater plan, and I look forward to that, but we'll largely defer to the Conservation Commission on that one. But Number 6 is about the vehicular and pedestrian traffic and the parking. And I am a little concerned here about this, and it's, it's a problem not only for this site, but every site in the harbor and soon for the village where we have a lot of redevelopment going on. But I'm going to ask first, Mr. Kirchian, our peer reviewer, your cover page mentioned Article 22 of the bylaw. I don't believe that's applicable here. I don't believe this property is in that overlay. And who's using the term mixed use, and how is someone defining mixed use here?
Yes, so we had looked at the applicants, the use of the 1 per 200 for the parking was coming, just pull up this specific.
Oh,
Yeah, the one for 200 square feet of net parking area was coming from a mixed use. I think it's been kind of clarified that it's not a pure restaurant, but if it was a pure restaurant, it would have a different number of parking spaces required. We're also seeking some clarification on the number of kitchens has a parking requirement too. So those are, I guess that's the element that we're cross-checking. This is in 700.3.
all right. Well, let's get to that. So what is, if I look at 7.1, our parking regulations, 7.1E says 1 space for each 3 seats or where benches are used, blah, 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 and it goes on. What is that calculation? What is it supposed to be? How many spaces?
Yes, so there should be 46.
46, and 28 is being proposed.
Correct, yeah.
All right, so I'll ask Mr. Brodsky or Mr. Darren Grady, what's the justification of 26, is it?
It's 28.
28, I'm sorry.
So just to take a half step back, as I mentioned, before the project was designed, we had a pre-application meeting with the planning and building department, and we specifically called out the various uses that were being proposed, and we received the opinion of the building commissioner that because we were proposing multiple different uses from restaurant, retail, public uses, that the building commissioner's opinion this would qualify as a mixed use development, a term that's actually not defined within the zoning bylaw. And
Correct.
so parking was calculated in accordance with that guidance that we were given. This is a discussion that we're having with the zoning board, so I want to be careful here. The zoning board is used to calculating pure restaurants with respect to seats and benches, and we were asked to do that calculation for the zoning board, although again, this was all designed in compliance with the guidance that we were provided by the town itself. So we are going to do that calculation and provide that information to the zoning board. I don't have those numbers for you. Now, with respect to the proposed reduction in parking, the present parking use is non-conforming. There's substantially less parking that would be required under the current zoning act for the existing restaurant function building. And there's precedent in the town to allow you to maintain that non-conforming parking use. And we're using that precedent here to provide the non-conforming parking. So while we're required to have 40, Clark, happy to answer questions. So we're required to have, I believe, 46. We're providing 28, and we are going to be producing a parking demand study to support that, to ensure that there will be no parking issues associated with the property. The zoning board also asked us to consider some alternatives, which we're in the process of doing. I'm going to add to that alternative the suggestion of a one-way loop with diagonal parking to see if we can get more parking out there. But again, that is the rationale for our request for a special permit to extend the existing non-conforming parking use.
All right, thank you. Mr.
Clark,
Brewer, I
let's-
see you.
Clark-
Mr. Brewer, I
Clark,
see
let's-
you, but Mr. Callahan is
Well,
still.
it's not done. That's okay.
Okay, can you put your hand down, please? I know you wish to speak.
Yeah, Clark, let me finish. I'll be quick.
No worries.
Well, look, as I opened my remarks, I like this project. However, parking is a concern. Over to the left side in front of the Salt House, I guess it wasn't an issue when it was all under common ownership, but I'm hearing that spaces that the Salt House would use today are going to be taken. The applicant has a proposed use down the street that'll have parking demands. I don't think we can ignore that, in terms of criteria number 6 under 12B, 12B.6B. I don't think we can ignore that. I just want this to, I want us to all be creative about how to deal with this, because it's not just this applicant's problem, it's a townwide problem for parking down here. But I also don't see that under Article 7 of our bylaw, we have a hell of a lot of flexibility. Mixed use, yes, in the current bylaw is not a defined term, but I think the common understanding of that is it's a combined commercial and residential use, which we don't have here. And the mixed use section says the number of parking spaces shall be calculated separately for each use. So if you're going to talk about mixed commercial uses, and we have a combination of a restaurant under subsection E and retail under subsection G, which subsection G is requiring 1 space for 100 square feet. Where are we supposed to be there? Is it 46? Is it 28? Or is it a number somewhere in between? I just don't think we can gloss over this issue too quickly, because I think Clark is right. This is going to be a popular spot. Spaces that this spot once used for valet parking are gone. You're taking space that's commonly used by a shop, a restaurant next door. Those are going to be taken from it. And I think we have to get creative of how we're going to figure this out. But I'm not sure 28 is the right calculation either. I look forward to discussing this a little further, but and I'd like to know how we are going to come up, maybe it's the zoning board under the non-conforming article would allow some variance from the number, but if the number is 46 or some other lesser number, but greater than 28, I don't know how we have the flexibility to get around that, and then from that, make a successful finding under 12.6B6. So those are my thoughts at the moment, but feel free, Adam, please.
Oh, no, thank you, sir. Madam Chair, can I just respond briefly?
Yes.
Thank you. We clearly recognize the planning board's jurisdiction to deal with vehicular movement and traffic. However, I think the zoning issues related to the parking and the parking count and sufficiency are properly in front of the zoning board, and we recognize that we need to satisfy the zoning board, because if we don't get the special permit relief that we've asked for, we don't have a project. I just would like to point out that this project only relates to 46 Border Street. The old Salt House is a separate property owned by different owners and subject to different permitting requirements. We're not aware of the old Salt House having any easement for parking on this property, and so that's why it wasn't accommodated here. And any proposed development for 82 Border Street around the corner is also not the subject of this application. And whatever project is going to be proposed there is going to have to separately satisfy zoning requirements. There's a long history of all of these properties, 124 Elm, 87 Elm, 44 Border Street, 46 Border Street, and 82 Border Street being held in common ownership. And so it's a lot easier to perhaps manage these things. But as you know, that's no longer the case, and each of these properties are going to have to figure out their parking requirements separately, or perhaps jointly. I don't know whether that's another possibility, but what's before the planning board now is simply the redevelopment of 46 Border Street. So I'm not suggesting your concerns aren't valid.
No, then I'm going to suggest, subsection 1, B1 says that, et cetera, not harmful, injurious, or objectionable to existing or future uses in the area. You know, like I spoke favorably with the criteria, that criteria in terms of the design of the building, but I think that also gives us the ability to consider what's going on in the whole area now and in the future. And again, parking is a problem for all the commercial developments in the harbor that everybody has to, we all have to be creative to address.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Callahan, and thank you, Mr. Brodsky. I'd like to comment before Mr. Brewer does, as we were going in alphabetical order. First off, I'd like to say that we're 30 minutes over, so I'd like to get this wrapped up. Second thing I'd like to say is that I don't really feel that we can pursue any further conversation because the items that our peer review have identified have not been addressed to us in response to that. So I would request that the applicant go through this peer review in detail and offer alternatives to the points that were raised. The second point I'd like to make is that the building inspector does not make the decision around site plans. The planning board does that. And so asking the building inspector about what's the appropriate outcome for this is probably not helpful in the sense that we have to go through a process and we're responsible for it. So I have concerns about the definition of mixed use. I look forward to hearing about the extent to which the project does or does not have any relationship to Chapter 91. I think that there were a number of points that were raised by the peer review, such as loading, unloading, trash, various things that just have to be worked out and be brought back before us again. So I would recommend that we continue this hearing and give the applicant opportunity to sort through the peer review and allow us to understand the solutions that we can try to find together. It's not going to be a one person view of things. I would also like to, I have a public comment first, and then I also would like to ask our legal counsel before we go back through the planning board members. Lauren Lind.
Thank you. I just wanted to point for the applicant and the board's benefit that we did receive a comment from the from Assistant Chief Dockeray requesting a swept path analysis for this site. That would be something else to add for your resubmission for any supplemental materials.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to read the comment that was in the chat from we have one comment from a citizen. Mr. McCarthy, 278 Jerusalem Road. Are the boat slips also public slips or will they be private slips? If they're private, will they be gated, giving no access to the actual slips? Additionally, architecturally, has there been any thought given to any sustainability architecture structures, i.e. roof of solar panels, wind, et cetera, given the open exposed roof and land? No one needs to respond to that per se. That's going to go into the record and that will be something that the applicant can consider. I want to introduce our legal counsel, Mr. Joel Bard, and ask if he has any comments he'd like to make. You're muted, sir.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was muted for such a long time. Yes, Joel Bard from KP Law. I just want to say Carolyn Murray wasn't available tonight, so I'm happy to be able to fill in for her. I don't have any comments. I will mention that I have been sitting in on the zoning board as well, so I've seen the presentation, heard some of the questions. I will add, by the way, that you had the benefit of a rendering, which I hadn't seen before, and I just want to congratulate the architects for adding that. I think that's probably helpful for everybody. So no, as you may have heard, parking also has been an issue that's been discussed at the zoning board, but I don't have any specific comments. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brewer, would you like to make a comment? And then then it looks like Mr. Callahan would like to speak, but I really do want to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm going to be quick. So I was going to suggest the shared parking study or a parking demand study when Adam, the applicant's attorney, brought it up, because it's clear that while it may not be traditional mixed use where you have office and retail that have different or residential and retail, which have different peak hours, you do have some spaces like a coffee shop that's not going to be peak at the same time as the fine dining restaurant, and the Lobster Pound, which probably is going to be, 10 minutes in and 10 minutes out, as opposed to sitting at the fine dining restaurant for an hour. So I think that's wholly appropriate. So I look forward to seeing that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, mine is
Last
just a quick,
question.
mine's just a quick related question for Mr. Kirchian. When you're calculating the 46 spaces, are you doing that strictly under subsection E?
Mr. Callahan, we can't hear you, sorry,
Why not?
because you were away from us.
Well, I'm trying to read that again. All right, Mr. Kirchian, how are you coming up to 46? Are you calculating it strictly under subsection E of 7.1? Or is it some combination?
It is through 7.1. It's based on the square footage of the restaurants and then the square footage of the ice cream shop, the Lobster Pound. We have a table in the memo that summarizes sort of how we were
Okay,
getting.
all right. So you are essentially combining subsection E and subsection G and coming up with a calculation. E being the restaurant use and G being the retail uses, because
I think it's this 1 per 200 square foot of net floor area of each use.
where is that coming from?
I guess let me check back. Unfortunately, we had our traffic engineer look at the parking portion of this, and Brad might know the exact citation. Because it was matching with the applicant's letter.
Mr. Callahan, it's Adam Brodsky. I can tell you where that is.
Yeah.
And so that's correct. That is our parking calculation also as to what is required under current zoning. And it's based under subsection E. It's the last sentence in subsection E. For restaurants that are part of a mixed-use development, 1 space per 200 square feet of net floor area. And then with respect to the retail uses, that's under subsection G, which I believe is 1 space for each 100 square feet of net floor area, which is how we did our calculations.
Yeah, all right. I appreciate that. I just.
All right, can
All
I?
right. Well, we'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that
um,
later, but I understand it.
So needless to say, we're going to continue this hearing, and I'd like to ask Ms. Lynn to give us a date and time for our next meeting. And what would be really beneficial is if we could have responses to the peer review and move the question of parking forward, as well as some of the other issues like definitions that are not clear right now.
Madam Chair, this is Adam Brodsky. At the beginning of my presentation, I asked the question of when Weston and Sampson may have its stormwater review, because we thought it might be helpful if we had that information ahead of time. We could respond to all of Weston and Sampson's comments at the same time rather than doing it in a piecemeal fashion.
Mr. Cookjian, when do you think the rest of the reports will be done?
Yes, so we did just receive the stormwater report, and I'm just pulling up the dates here. So the COMCOM meeting is on May 5th. So in advance of that, I'm just trying to pull the exact date, but yeah, so by April 28th, we have the stormwater report review memo to be submitted to the COMCOM. And then I guess we haven't discussed the timing of like a response to our initial peer review comments, which also touch on stormwater. So it sounds like, I don't know, Lauren, if you have a preference of how this is done, or.
So just so everybody knows, the next meeting we have is extremely packed. And so there will be nothing that we can put on in our next meeting. So we're looking further into the future. Ms. Lynn, could you give us a date and time?
Yes, absolutely. So originally I was looking at the earliest at May 11th. I'm wondering if, given timeline, we continue this to the following May meeting, which is May 27th. That way you have time. If there's any additional tweaks that come up conservation, you can address that and have our peer review have time to review and either comment that case closed or you need to do more work. So I would turn to the applicant to see if that timeline makes sense for you.
Mr. Brodsky?
Ms. Lynn, I'm reaching out to the team. I think, yes, that will work. Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
so we'll continue to May 27th at 6:30 p.m.
All right. starting off again. All right. Thank you all very much. And let's move on to the next public hearing. Mr. Grady, could
I'm
you
sorry.
please?
I'm sorry. Well,
Yes.
I was looking at the wrong calendar date. It's
Oh.
May 25th, Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 6:30 PM. And you need to take a vote to
Make
continue
a
that.
motion,
Yes.
make a motion to continue this to May 25th at 6:30.
Can I get a second?
Second,
Roll call, Mr. Brewer,
aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Lynn?
I'm sorry. Thank you, applicants. This is a comment for the chair. I just wanted to note, we can dismiss Joel Bard from KP Law. We don't typically have legal counsel sit on our large home review. So thank you, Joel. And on behalf of the board, your presence is always appreciated.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We'll
Joel.
see
Good night,
you
everyone.
again.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, would you put up the next public hearing for Mr. Grady to read?
Yes, let me get there.
You have to go, Paul. I can read it if you want.
No, that's okay. I made some arrangements, but thanks so much.
All right, I have it now.
Notice of public hearing, Cohasset Planning Board. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40-A and 300-54 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a virtual public hearing on the Zoom platform webinar ID 858-7173-9424, password 184733 on Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 at 6:30 PM for a large house plan review for property being shown on Cohasset Assessor's Map F324-020, 205 Atlantic Avenue, Cohasset, Mass. 02025. The application is for a large house plan review for renovation of a single-family home with a total residential gross floor area, RGFA, of 9,361 square feet. The application is submitted by Mink Island Property Holdings, LLC, care of Andrew Flynn. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are on file in the town clerk's office at Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, with office hours of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Electronic copies of said application can be obtained by contacting Planning Director Lauren Lind via email at lind@cohassetma.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should access the virtual meeting at the time designated. Signed, Amy Glassmeyer, Chair, Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Mr. Flynn, on behalf of Mink Island Property Holdings, would you please identify who will be speaking with us tonight?
Evening. Yes, it would be great if we could also add Lauren Troy Sober from Lombardi Landscape Design, as well as Vince Falatico from Brooks and Falatico. Please.
Certainly.
What will be the order of people speaking, sir?
Great. It will be myself and then Vincent and then Troy.
Thank you.
Okay.
I believe you can begin, sir.
Great. Well, first and foremost, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you very much for your time this evening. We sincerely appreciate it. My name is Andrew Flynn. I'm a lifelong resident of Cohasset. I currently reside just down the street from this property at 22 Sheldon Road. Very pleased for the opportunity to present to you this evening. Work closely with the design team to come up with a site plan really through a lens of stewardship. And I'd say we have endeavored to be thoughtful in our design. We've endeavored to embrace the natural topography and as well as deliver something that is of scale and contextual with the surrounding fabric. And I'll turn it over to Vince in a moment, but I really think the main design goal, as Vince will walk us through, has been to deliver a home plan which is really nestled into the existing topography in somewhat of an homesteadian sense. So I will turn it over to Vince and then to Troy, and we look forward to discussing further. So thank you very much again for your time this evening.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to everyone for taking the time tonight to review our application. I did want to clarify, this is not a renovation. This is a new home. I believe in the notice it said a renovation. So this is just to start the presentation. We've got a rendering showing, what the house is going to look like. And I would like to point out that the landscape we're showing is not just a generic, way of softening up the project. This is actually the location and sizes of landscape that are being proposed, at this preliminary time. I thought I'd start with site plan, give you a sense of what we're dealing with in terms of the site. It is, as I said, there's nothing on the site now. There is a current curb cut, and this tennis court does exist. The house itself does not exist. So the project we're proposing, using the existing curb cut and minimally dealing with grade to get up to a parking court. And then given the 50-foot setback that we need to be wary of, we've designed a very long, narrow house that really hugs these edges of the property. Let's see, the house itself is, is the gross floor area. The allowable on the site is 15,246 square feet. The actual house that we're proposing is only 9,775 square feet. And in terms of building coverage, there's a 20% allowable coverage. We're at 7.1% right now. So we've really, as Andrew said, really tried to design something with a scale that would fit in with the neighborhood. And just to give you some context, we've done this study. All of the sizes we're giving you tonight. Oops, I'm having a little difficulty here. Anyway, so as you can see, this is the property we are talking about. I'm sorry, I'm having some panning issues here. There we go. All right, so the property that we're talking about is here, and you can see our area in this property is 9,361 square feet. The property next to us, apologize. The property next to us has two buildings. I'm not able to, I'm having issues with panning and I don't know why. Let's see.
Vince, that's all right. We can come back to these details if
necessary. I've got it back now. So the property next to us has two homes. I think it's important to put the site in context, both of which are actually larger than the proposed house here. The carriage house on this property is 10,704 square feet, and the main house on here is 11,864 square feet. A house across the street here is also larger at 13,193 square feet. So all this is just by way of saying, we were attempting to build something that was, contextual in terms of size and scale. The house itself, talk about some of the features. We really went out of our way to break since it is a long and linear house, as I said, we went out of our way to break the scale down by a series of roof lines, keep making sure that all of the upper floors were tucked into roofs with dormers. We have a sort of a tower element here, another house element here, and then a small element by the pool over here, all connected. Material wise, and then at the back here, we've got a great covered porch. The material elements that we're looking at, very traditional, also in context with the neighborhood. We're looking at either a wood or a slate roof that has not been determined. Shingle siding painted a warm gray color, deep blue shutters, and so all, as I said, in an effort to provide a home that is in context. It also complies with all current zoning. So the height of the house complies, we comply with setbacks, coverage, and lot coverage as well. And I thought at this time I'd hand it over to Troy from Lombardi Design to talk about landscaping and lighting, and then we could answer any questions you might have.
Good evening, everyone. Troy Sober with Lombardi Design. As Andrew and Vince alluded to, the rendering that you're seeing on the screen right now is a rendering that is showing the landscape intent as viewed from Atlantic, looking up towards the house. Kind of starting to orient you a little bit in terms of a plan view, conceptual rendering. You will approach the house moving up from the existing curb cut. We do have a parking drive area to allow cars to go in and out of the garage and move back down the driveway. We also have a pool that is nestled close to the house itself, keeping everything in and out of the resource, as we've gone through with Conservation Commission and working closely with them to pull everything as far out of the resource as possible, and working with them as well as developing appropriate plant palette for the site. One of the key features that we thought was important as well was the tennis court. It's currently an asphalt tennis court, and we are resurfacing that to a grass court to reduce visual impact and to work a little better with the ecology of the site in that area. There is circulation down and around the property itself. But of course, we do need the ability to think a little bit about safety and path lights, down lights, sconces around the property itself. I think of important note, we always like to do, I know this looks kind of a little complicated, but it's just simply a photometric plan. So the red outline shows the extent of the light pollution beyond the property, keeping it predominantly close to the house, with the exception of finding ways to safely light the entry drive and the entry piers. And that's the one exclusion that it actually crosses the property line. But you can also see here as well as keeping it really close to the east side of the house, with little to no lighting towards the neighbors behind, kind of planned south as it may be actually west of the house here. And sconces and fixtures we could go over as we may have questions for that. And really the materials for the landscape will complement the house. Site appropriate walls, paving, all natural materials, as well as a traditional entry drive that can be plowable and easily maintained throughout the life of the project. So I think with that, if there are any questions relative to landscape, we kind of take them as we see fit.
So what we'll do is we'll go, as we did in the previous hearing, through the individual planning board members. But the first thing that I'd like us to start with was, I know that you've been before the Conservation Commission. Can you provide us with any insights as to how that conversation's going?
Yes, I can provide an update, and thank you, Vince and Troy, and thank you, Madam Chair. So we had been working with Conservation for the past several months. We worked with them in a very collaborative fashion to incorporate feedback from various members of the commission. And last week, we received full approval from the Conservation Commission, as well as for the site plan, as well as for the stormwater permit. So that is where we are with Conservation. We have received full approval from them.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Mr. Brewer, would you like to begin?
Sure. Yeah, a couple of comments. First, what I would like to say is I think the design, I am a registered architect on the board. The design, I think, is excellent. While I haven't seen so many rounded corners in plan with arches and elevation used together, I'm excited to see how that massing ends up playing out. I think it's gonna be a really great individual participant in the neighborhood with its own set of unique style, but obviously quite serious. And the scaling of the house away from the street, I think, is a wholly appropriate way to deal with the massing. Obviously, the highest part is also on the water side, but I think that those moves from the design team make sense. In looking at the lighting plan, there's a PL1 light fixture that looks like it's mounted on either side of the stone wall entry piers, but I don't see the actual fixture in the schedule that follows the lighting plan. Is that something you could pop up quickly?
Yes, I believe so.
PL1.
Yes.
And
So-
as well as, while we have some dead time, the land management plan and the restoration approach, can someone from your team just talk about that briefly as well?
Yes, I can touch on that. And, that is something that evolved over the course of the discussion with conservation.
Yeah.
So working closely with Wilkinson Ecological Design, we continue to work closely with Wilkinson, but one of the main areas of their scope was the ecological restoration of a large area of knotweed within the 50-foot buffer, which, knotweed being an invasive species. The design team and our initial thought as we conceived it was that restoring that area would be ecologically appropriate and preferred. As we worked closely with the commission, they gave us direction that they would prefer that the knotweed within the 50-foot buffer remain wholly undisturbed, despite its presence as an invasive. So accordingly, Wilkinson's land management plan, which initially contemplated very heavy restoration within the 50-foot buffer in order to remediate the knotweed, we ultimately, at the request of conservation and working in collaboration with conservation, that part of the restoration scope was removed. And accordingly, the knotweed within the 50-foot buffer will remain undisturbed. And so the land management plan, there are other elements of it. And as Troy and Vince referenced, the tennis court is being converted from an impervious asphalt surface to a lawn surface. And there's a handful of other areas that we are kind of improving from an ecology standpoint. But that is one area, Mr. Brewer, where conservation directed us to make some changes, and we ultimately agreed to incorporate their direction.
Okay, thanks for the outline. And I do see that PL1 fixture, which is set back from Atlantic Avenue, Atlantic Ave enough, I think, to not be glaring in drivers coming around the corner. That was going to be my comment. But other than that, I think looks like an exciting project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brewer. Mr. Callahan?
Yes, I'm not overly concerned about compliance with the large home review regulations here and granting a permit there, but I am concerned about our new clearing and ledge removal bylaws, which might require special permits. I didn't see any figures on any of your charts or boxes doing those necessary calculations. By my count, you're removing 77% of the trees, which is concerning. The fact that you're—
Excuse me, Tom, the applicant may not have seen those bylaws as they're new.
Well, that's why I'm bringing them to the applicant's attention.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Because that's my concern here. So I don't know that it needs to hold up this permit, but staff and the applicant will need to get together. we need to see a calculation of total lot clearing, which if it exceeds 70% for new construction will require a special permit. And if there's any visible ledge on the site that is to be removed other than for the construction of the house, that would require a special permit as well with this board, both of those with this board. So I'd like that looked into by Lauren and John and the applicant. And again, it might not have to hold up this permit, this particular permit, but I'd like to know what the answer to that is.
I believe there was no
Vince,
exposed.
Vince, I can touch on that. Mr. Callahan, I appreciate the feedback and the direction, and I can tell you that conceptually, from a design standpoint, we certainly are mindful to the sensitivities of clear cutting lots, and accordingly, we've endeavored to preserve as many trees as we can. And in terms of the location of the house, ultimately, a key guiding constraint and principle was to keep it not only out of the 50-foot buffer, but as far out of 100-foot buffer as possible. And so that's ultimately why we ended up with the house upgrade, and conservation was appreciative of that approach.
I appreciate that, but now we have a clearing restriction of 70%, and that might mean that you don't have a 9,600 square foot house, you have a 9,000 square foot house.
No, absolutely. And I was just going to round out the thought. I was going to say, we would welcome the opportunity to further discuss that with staff. I think certain members of our team have been aware of that, very recent new bylaw, but I think we have, we've been looking for a little bit of direction on exactly how to interpret it and apply it.
Okay. And what about visible ledge? Is there going to be any alteration of visible ledge other than where the house is sitting?
From our understanding, I can't attest to that in detail. Our initial calculations were that there's less than 1% of the site has visible ledge on it, and that's being removed for the primary home. But I think we could follow up in more detail with staff to make sure the way we're looking at it is consistent with the way the new bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, you've driven by the site a zillion times, but I can't tell you if there's a lot of ledge on it or not. But again, I appreciate that a lot of people don't know about the two new bylaws yet, but it's my duty to bring it to everyone's attention. So that's what I'm doing. All right.
Tom, I think it's also important for you to include the fact that the driveway does not count. Is that correct?
I believe, yeah, the house. And
Okay.
the driveway.
All right. Thank you.
I do want to say though, in the first thing, under the criteria for large home reviews, scale of buildings, I appreciate that the applicant has volunteered what the neighboring houses, the sizes are. That's something I always ask about, and a lot of people don't volunteer it. So I'm satisfied that particular criteria is satisfied, even with the size of this house.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Grady?
It's a nice looking home. Looks to be a nice project, well thought out, but I will second Tom's concerns and wait for the answers there. Other than that, it's a nice presentation, so I'll just await the further developments at this point.
All right. I really have no comments. I have looked very carefully at the materials and feel that the applicant has been responsive to working with the town. And while I agree that there needs to be an understanding both in terms of lot clearing and ledge removal, that I would refer that to town staff to figure out what's actually happening and then report back to us. So I'd like to know what's the planning board's pleasure at this point.
Well, I'd just as soon vote to approve with the condition that they meet with the building inspector and the planner on the two zoning bylaws that are recent, and then we allow them to confirm conformance with those bylaws.
All right. Do I have comments from other planning board members? Someone would like to second that?
When Lauren drafts this, I would just add, as a matter of course, that we make the requisite findings.
It's kind of fading out. Your mouth at the mic. The mouth has to be at the mic.
All right, I'll put this damn thing in front of me then. All right. I just want to make sure that we make the that the decision reflects that we're making the requisite findings under 5.4C 1 through 1A through D,
The criteria.
the criteria, yes, and that we're satisfied that all of those, we're making the findings that all of those criteria are met.
All right, do we have a second on Mr. Brewer's recommendation? And Tom's consideration?
I don't know. Did I actually make a motion or?
Well, I sort of thought you were close to doing
Right.
that.
It was close to a motion. All right, then.
Clark and I made a combined motion. Paul, please second.
The combined motion is on the table.
Can I get a second?
I'll second the combined motion.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alphabetical, Mr. Brewer,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you very much.
Nice
Thank you
project.
for
Good luck
waiting
with it.
too.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
much.
All right, let's go to our next public hearing. Mr. Grady, Ms. Lynn, can you please put up the notice that Mr. Grady can read?
Yes, let me get that last notice up.
Laura, you can take me off then as a panelist and let me in again too.
You
just
came
don't
up
wanna-
right
You just don't
away.
want to read anything anymore.
Notice of public hearing, Cohasset Planning Board. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40-A and 300-5.4 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a virtual public hearing on the Zoom platform, webinar ID 858-7173-9424, password 184733 on Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. for a large house plan review for property being shown on Cohasset Assessor's Map D4 16-051, 66 Jerusalem Road, Cohasset, Mass. 02025. The application is for a large house plan review for renovation of a single-family home with a total residential gross floor area, RGFA, of 5,380 square feet, change RGFA, plus 817 square feet. The application is submitted by GDI Custom Homes. A copy of the application plans and accompanying documents are on file in the town clerk's office at Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, with office hours of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Electronic copies of said application can be obtained by contacting Planning Director Lauren Lind via email at lind@cohassetma.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should access the virtual meeting at the time designated. Signed, Amy Glassmeyer, Chair, Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. And I would appreciate the applicant who is representing GDI Custom Homes to identify who will be speaking with us tonight.
So, Madam Chair, I've promoted Mr. Christopher Greeley, the attorney representing the applicant, and then we also have the applicant, Jan Hansel, here as well. Mr. Greeley, if there's anyone else that should be promoted, please just let me know.
Absolutely. Hello, Lauren, Madam Chair, members of the board. I appreciate your time. Nice to see you again. Dennis Greenwood, if we could promote Dennis to the panel, I would appreciate it. Dennis is the Associate Principal of Sousa Design Architects, and he'll be assisting with the presentation tonight. This is a presentation related to the proposed residential project at 66 Jerusalem Road in Cohasset. The project involves a modest addition to the existing residential dwelling, 817 square foot addition, and the existing vacant home will be renovated to include additional living space, primarily on the second floor of an addition that's in keeping, we believe, and harmonious with the existing neighborhood and in context with the criteria for the large home review. If Dennis would like to begin, we can proceed.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Good evening, members of the board. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of briefly walk you through some of the context, some site photos, the existing conditions before we kind of get into the proposed design. And I'll kind of just, I know it's late, so I'll kind of breeze through stuff. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. So as Chris mentioned, we're looking to do a renovation in addition to an existing single-family home. The existing floor area of the existing house is 4,563 square feet. With the addition, we are going to be at 5,380 square feet. That's a change of 17% with an added square footage of 817 square feet. The lot size is 20,173 square feet. So here we just have the overall site context map. We're going to briefly show you imagery of all the homes within the 300-foot radius here. The property is located at the corner of Jerusalem Road and Redgate Lane. And without kind of going too into detail with all the adjacent properties, you know, the large takeaways are that they range between 3,000 and a little over 5,000 square feet typically. They're colonial and Cape style homes for the most part, where you see a lot of shingle and clapboard siding. They range from 2 to 2.5 stories. So again, if there's any questions on the specifics of any of these, we can talk about them. But again, the takeaway is kind of more stylistically, I wanted to show a little bit of context as to what's in the neighborhood, show you how we're looking to work with that context, integrate some of that vernacular into the proposed design, and show that we are in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood, because even though we're doing an addition, we're going to maintain the existing ridge line, and the square footage in itself is not excessive of what's in the neighborhood. So here's an existing photo along Jerusalem Road. The existing house is a little disjointed architecturally. You can see it doesn't really lend itself to a specific architectural style, unlike most of the neighboring homes. So really what you have is you have kind of a neoclassical center entry that's mixed with some different Cape style elements in the clapboard siding, but then you have almost more Alpine-like aesthetics with overextended roof lines and kind of odd wing walls and geometries. So as we looked at this, we're looking at how we kind of utilize the existing footprint, manipulate the roof lines to create a more cohesive design that worked better within the neighborhood and really kind of gave a little bit of balance to the overall house. You know, the other thing that stands out here is there's a lot of exposed roof lines. So we started looking at how we break that up, break up some of these flat facades that are along Jerusalem Road, and eliminate some of that large expanse of the shingle roofing. Here's a couple more context views a little bit further down Jerusalem Road. You can see there's an existing retaining wall here between the existing lawn and along the street. There's also, it's hard to make out, but there's a little kind of piece of retaining wall that actually returns here as well. That is an existing walkway that goes up along here to that entryway, which you'll kind of see better depicted in some of the renderings and in the site plan. There's an existing outdoor patio area here. In that area, that's actually going to get eliminated, and we're looking to add, extend the garage, which you'll see in the floor plans. From this view, you can see, again, there's kind of some odd geometries with the roof line coming down. We kind of get to a small volume on the left side here where it extends up to a very, to the ridge that then comes down at a 45-degree cant. Again, kind of several different odd conditions that we're looking to kind of level out and create a little bit more symmetry and cohesive design in the proposed development. So in the back of the lot, you can see there's an existing fence between 66 Jerusalem and the adjacent property. The intent, which we'll go over in the landscape plan, is to replace that in kind. It's in rough shape, so there will still be a fence here. The fence at the far end is proposed to be removed, which again, we'll look at in the landscape plan. But you can see how in the back, there's colonial elements that kind of mimic that neoclassical entry on the front. But again, a lot of different kind of odd geometries coming in and not really much of a cohesive building as it is now. For reference, this is the existing floor plans. So the total square footage now is 4,563 square feet. We just wanted to provide these for reference. And some of the upcoming slides, you'll see this outline of where the existing footprint is in relation to the proposed footprint for easy reference as well. Existing elevations. So this really just reflects the photos that you just saw. The existing building height is 20 foot, 11 inches from the mean grade. In the proposed design, we're going to keep that upper ridge. That will not be changing. This is the front elevation here. You can see that line. We will not be going above that line. So even though the height of the building technically changes because we're measuring from midpoints of sloped roofs, the upper ridge will not be changing it at all. And we will still be under the max allowable height pretty significantly, actually, in the proposed design. Whoops. Back one here. Okay, so here's the proposed front elevation shown in rendering. You can see the retaining walls maintained here. That was that little piece I mentioned. You know, the big thing that we did is I think we were looking to take the proportions that are in the neighborhood of the residential scale and bring those back to this property. So we're using that traditional gable roof lines to create a little bilateral symmetry along the entry. We have paneled square columns where we're covering the porch to, again, kind of demarcate that front entry piece. We have standing seam roof over that element. We break down this bay with a little smaller bay that protrudes out just a foot, you know, really kind of creating kind of nice smaller elements that we think helps improve the streetscape along Jerusalem Road and helps accentuate different pieces. We have a little added dormer over that entry, like I mentioned, to help break up that kind of large expanse of existing asphalt shingle roofing that's there now. We're introducing smaller gable roof structures here and protruding that out a foot just to give a little bit of depth. You know, as existing now, there's very flat eaves. There's not much of a rake detail at all. So we're looking to bring that back and add a little additional depth. We're using the clapboard siding with 4.5 inches to weather on the lower floors. Then we're switching over to vertical siding, Burrell vertical siding on the upper floors, and then these smaller bays here. For the landscaping, we'll go over the landscaping plan, but essentially the path that's here remains. We're looking to just do some very minimal landscape lighting, dark sky compliant lighting along the walkway. Underneath the covered porch, there'd be downlights. Other than that, there's no exterior lighting along the front facade here. So this is still along Jerusalem Road, but it's a little further up towards Redgate Lane, looking back towards the house. You can see these bays kind of that break down the scale, again, of that element that's there. We extended the garage, right? So that's existing. There was a smaller garage at the end. This is now a 3-car garage with a 10-foot door and then a 16-foot garage door. Pulled that down, had little dormers along the second floor over that garage. That's the majority of the added square footage is on that second floor, where we added some area with those dormers, get some head height there. There was an existing wing wall that came down. If you remember that geometry, that roof kind of came down all along here and then returned back towards that entry. We eliminated that, used a little volume here to create a balcony adjacent to that. And again, break down that massing into smaller bays that we think work well with the residential scale and create a very nice feeling along the streetscape. Now jumping back to some of the more technical aspects. So the addition brings us to 5,380 square feet. As you can see, as I mentioned, there's the garage here that we expanded. The red line indicates where the previous footprint of the building was. So we eliminated that wing wall. We're bringing in a portion of this exterior wall so we can get some more articulation along that elevation, create a little bit more depth, level of interest, create a nice facade there while maintaining the existing setback from the street. On the second floor, we have an addition over the garage. Like I said, we're adding those dormers. So you can see that's those pockets where we actually have head height are at the dormers. At the back, you'll see on the landscaping plan, we set back 30 feet from the rear property line to make sure that we're in compliance with all the zoning setbacks. The existing footprint of the garage below remains where it is. Here we have the landscaping plan. Again, you can see in red the previous building extents. So there is an addition here, which is mostly garage, but part of that is a mudroom entry. This is where that exterior patio was that I pointed out earlier that was enclosed with a fence. As you come up the walkway, you can see the small landscape lights that I mentioned that are dark sky compliant. Underneath that front covered porch, we have the recessed lights. On the way up that walk, we are looking to put in some boxwood, some green velvet boxwoods, as well as some flowering perennials to dress up that elevation a little bit, have a nice little planter bed. The existing brick walkway is to remain. At the porch, it does get reconfigured a little bit. Obviously, we cut off a portion of that existing brick walkway just so that we can put in that covered porch. There's a few other existing patios along the southern and western side of the house. Those are going to remain. The fence along the southern portion of the house is to be removed. And as I mentioned, the existing fence will be replaced in kind along that western property line. There's some existing ledge in the back. We won't be touching that. All of the existing open lawn space is to remain. And the driveway, this will all be gravel driveway, which is in the same extent of where it is now, not increasing or decreasing the size of the driveway. In the back here, the black line indicates the existing garage on the first floor. That blue line indicates the line of the addition on the second floor. So that's at 30 feet. So we are beyond that setback. And again, the red line is kind of that existing wing wall that gets removed. You can see the small portions where we are infilling some of the building to kind of create more regular geometries. So here we have the line drawings representing, the 3D model that you saw. Our new building height is at 23 feet and 3/4 inches. So still well under that 35-foot allowable. Again, the top of the ridge as existing is going to remain. We're not going above that existing ridge line. And really what we did was we kind of broke it down into elements that we think are more appropriate for the neighborhood. Materials are appropriate for the neighborhood. We're looking at contemporary aluminum clad windows that we think kind of give a nice feel to the building. Again, the proportions, so we're looking at 10 and 12 pitch gable roofs that are more typical of Cape and colonial style construction. Here we have the elevations along the garage. So you can see the 3 dormers that we popped out over that garage, put in new garage doors. And then we have the southern facade, which was we broke up that long roof that came down. If you remember one of those original images, there's a long roof that came down barely above the ground over on this side. I think that's the overall view of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We're excited to present it, so I appreciate all your time.
Would anyone else from your group like to speak now? Or should we move in with the planning board members?
I think we can move in with the planning board members.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brewer.
Okay, yeah, as a renovation, I think that what the team has done is rebranded and kind of normalized to what is a weird 1980 aesthetic. I really don't have any problems with the heights. The height's not bad. It's a flat site. I will say from the rendering, some of those existing trees that are going to remain will give you a little bit of privacy. This particular rendering that you're showing us, it looks like everybody's going to be able to see everything that you're doing when you're driving by. And you've got landscaping features that are up against the foundation. And while the seasonal view down towards Little Harbor, it might make sense to have a layering of something in front of that stone wall to give your potential future. I mean, who's going to live in this? anybody on right now? Or is this a developer project?
No, the owner's not on right now.
Okay, so the owner's gonna owns it, but he's gonna sell it, right? So somebody else is gonna buy it. Right? That's the plan. It's a spec improvement. I mean, I think it's a good improvement, but those human factors and privacy issues, Jerusalem Road, it's not a super busy street like North Main Street, but I think that there's a privacy element that's missing in addition to the upper porches with the 4-inch spacing of the railing system that also allows people driving by to look straight into your house. So while in terms of a large home review, I'm happy to vote to approve. I just think that's something for you to think about.
Mr. Hansel, let the planning board members speak, please, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Those are my only comments.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Callahan?
So am I correct that the 2 trees that are out front are staying?
Yes, they are staying.
Because this
in front of the Christmas tree, right on the left side of the house, it's staying.
All right, well, this is a scenic road, and you just went through this on another property, so
yes.
Those trees should be untouched.
I know it's doesn't show on a rendering, but in landscaping plan, you can see those trees.
Right. Lauren, is this an after the fact application?
There was a construction activity that started on site, and then John Hallen alerted that it was a large house review was required, and that's how it came to us. So I do believe at some point there's a stop work order. I didn't have an opportunity to confirm that with John today as to the status of where that is, but the applicant was told that they had to stop what they were doing until they received the large house review for the other portion of the project.
All right. And is there any visible ledge being affected by the addition?
No.
All right. I have to tell you, Mr. Hansel, I'm troubled. This is strike 3 on after the fact. And I'm going to make the standard motion that I did the last time. That
I know.
Yes,
I'm
going to refer to Mr. Yeah, I'm going to refer to Mr. Howland.
Mr. Hansel, please.
I'm going to refer to Mr. Howland to make a fine and as he sees appropriate. That's all I can do.
I don't want to do any mistakes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Grady?
Well, I'm a little puzzled by this because it seems like a repeat of past performance. Because Mr. Hansel, forgive me, but mistakes have already been made. You started doing the work and now we have a stop work order. I would have to parrot Tom is to preservation landscape. It's a scenic road. And I would go along with that is getting all full approvals from Mr. Howland before anything else happens, or I'd say anything about it. That's all I have to say.
Right,
Madam
thank
Chair,
you.
may I be heard just very briefly?
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that there was a demolition only permit that was limited to certain exterior wrought on the property, which was approved, and there's no stop work order. My client has engaged in the large home review process based on the area and the requirement. This is something that I think is a misunderstanding, and I would object to any proposal for a fine based on that misunderstanding at this point. I hope that I'm able to correct it. Jan, is there anything you want to add to that? There was a rotten wall that had to be taken out.
Yes, but basically after I spoke with building inspector John Hallen, we basically stopped working there. When I find out, we'll go through the large home review, and we are not following any other work there.
There was a structural issue, and that was addressed with shoring.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I will say, though, that Mr. Hansel did not inquire about whether or not initially he needed to get a large house review. So in the future, it's really important to get all the papers together first and then step back and then decide what you're going to do, because you don't want to end up in a situation that we've been in before. I'd like to see one of the pictures where we can see the structure as is right now. Is that possible, please?
Yes.
Okay, so you are saying that the, is that a holly tree or is that a pine?
This is the holy tree.
Okay, so that's a holly and these two are
This
probably
is
shin oaks?
I
It's hard to
don't know.
say.
I don't know what this.
Okay, but those are going to stay on the property,
Yes,
correct?
yes, correct.
All right.
Yeah,
Mr. Callahan, would you like
yeah,
to?
I'm just concerned about the two big ones between the wall and the street because they may be in the right of way and it is a scenic road, so.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
this one
So,
and this one. but
The holly against the house, I could, it's outside the jurisdiction of the scenic road bylaw, so I'm not concerned about it.
all right. So we've got answers to those questions. Planning board members, does anyone have any further comments? Can I get some direction for what we would like to do?
Tom, you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Regarding the scale, I'll just make the comment that 5,000 something square feet versus everything 3,000 around it. It's out of scale, but it's already out of scale. If it's just an 871 foot, 800 some odd foot addition. So I'm not going to be concerned about it. So I'll
That's not your motion, right?
I'll make the motion that, no, that was just my last comment. I'll make the motion that the board make the requisite findings that 5.4C1 A through D have been satisfied and to approve a large home review.
Before we do that, did we have a thorough enough discussion about lighting? I didn't see a lighting plan in the documentation. Did I miss it?
We got a presentation.
Is on the landscaping pool. I just skipped it. Sorry, bear with me.
So are the red points the lighting?
Yeah, so the red
Okay,
with the L are the landscape lights, which are dark sky compliant, dome fixtures, down lights along the walkway.
All right.
The recessed we mentioned on the covered porch, and actually I had breezed past it, but there's 4 exterior wall sconces, whack lighting Rubik's fixtures that are downlight only, so they wash down the pilasters adjacent to the mudroom entry and the garage doors, which are also dark sky compliant.
All right, and as this house is occupied, it would be very helpful to inform the residents that live there that to the extent possible, please to install lights that do not glare out on with all those windows. It could end up being a gigantic light bulb. And so they really need to be sensitive to the neighbors around them, but also all the way across the harbor.
I'll second Tom's motion.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, Mr. Brewer,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a little bit of business to do. One of the pieces to begin with is Mr. Callahan would like to talk to us about some updates.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the zoning working group, I just want to update you on the pursuit of a consultant to help with the process. We only got one response to our bid from a company called Stantec. I guess they're out of Minnesota, but they have recently merged with a company here in Boston. They presented us with a proposal that was somewhat responsive to the RFQ, but not fully. It was very strong on design and, revitalization of downtowns and neighborhoods and what we considered maybe more at master plan level kind of work rather than zoning specific work. So the interview committee went through their proposal. We all had comments on it. We sent in written questions for them. We met with them. They responded to that to get some further clarification. The direction at the moment is that we are, for the actual bylaw writing itself, we are going to rely on our in-house capabilities and our town council. For technical stuff that we need, such as build-out analysis, a review perhaps about our current village bylaw and whether it needs any updating, and perhaps to help us with compliance with the MBTA housing requirement. We were going to go back to Stantec about that, but Lauren also told us to go back to that since we're changing the scope. We would have to rebid the job with that more limited scope. So I don't know that today that we came up with a conclusion on that, but I think that's the direction we are going. So we simply want to verify with KP Law that they're going to be able to do this, but I'll just tell you that there was Stantec gave us something that was called a bylaw diagnostic, and it was based on the bylaw in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. And then we also obtained one that KP did by a member of their firm who's a former land court judge, and it was like night and day. So KP has the specific Massachusetts zoning expertise. Stantec was going to provide us with an expert from Minnesota. So we just, there were parts of Stantec's proposal, as I said, we thought were great. On some of the very technical stuff we may need, they may be able to help us, but on the strict writing of the bylaw itself, that'll be done here in Massachusetts between our own resources and our attorney. And that's, did I say anything wrong, Lauren, or am I get everybody caught up on that? Yeah,
I think that's it.
Yeah, so Stantec has a couple offices in Boston.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the people I went to school with at Carnegie Mellon were our principals there in the Boston office. Stantec gave us an excellent proposal for the master plan, but we didn't take it. So it's sort of like a national firm that has areas of expertise. So I think that the approach of using the best of each available resource to solve and address the problems is way better than like one shoe fits all, like solve all our problems.
No, I get it, and that maybe.
So I like the approach. I don't like your feeling like you have to rewrite the bylaw.
No, I'm not.
As long as you're just influencing and not doing it yourself,
well,
okay.
Let's just say that ship has sailed. So I've already put. But that's besides the point. But that's what struck us about Stantec. If we were writing a master plan, or if we were an old industrial city that wanted to revitalize its downtown, they'd be perfect.
Sure.
They were at a higher level than what we're at for what we need.
We got a different place. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And most of their staffing was going to be from their Boston office, but like the zoning expert was Minnesota. Another person that they were going to dedicate to the job with 90 hours of the task, the largest of any single person, was someone with 3 years of experience and in their Albany office. They were devoting a lot of hours to their architect, and we didn't need architectural and design services. But with respect to the village and with respect to what the MBTA may throw down our throat with this housing thing, they could be helpful for that. And then when we get to the bylaw, and if we do, and I'm going to emphasize if to everybody listening, if we make any changes, propose any changes to the dimensional regulations, we are going to need build-out analysis. And that's not something we have an in-house capability for, and we will need a Stantec or somebody else to do that. So we're hoping they can. They're here, they've responded, they were the only one to respond, so hopefully we can keep them involved. But I can assure you that the interview committee gave it a very, very thorough review with very good and very well thought out comments on the proposal.
That sounds like progress, Tom.
Yep.
So Tom, can I ask you a question? Who's going to do the community organizing?
Well, this is an interesting thing. One of the other parts about the Stantec proposal that was disappointing is that their expert on community organizing was on maternity leave. And we did have a bit of a criticism that they did not prepare for that with some kind of substitute person to speak or substitute proposal. So as of today's zoning working group meeting, we're looking at the rewrite process is going to break down into, reorganization, housekeeping, moving things around, some minor changes, and then the real substantive stuff. So there's going to be at least 2 public forums, probably 3 or 4. We were talking about how those would be run today, but I don't think, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, if we came to a consensus on that. I guess we're still asking Stantec about it, but, to their fault, they didn't really, have a plan B to present that part to us because they didn't replace the person who was on maternity leave with some other alternative way of presenting. So so we don't really know what their capabilities really are, and we may have to still put that out to the extent we think we need facilitation help for that. I mean, I personally said at today's working group meeting, I don't think conducting a public forum is brain surgery, but it depends, I mentioned today, it's in large part going to be anticipating how many people might attend it, because, how you conduct a forum for 20 people versus, a town meeting size 150 people are 2 different things. So we're not quite there yet. Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Well, I personally have an opinion about this. I think that, Lauren?
Sorry, I was just going to add that, yes, this is very much unfolding. I need to confirm with council and also with our procurement director the exact steps and timelines to move forward. So a lot of the questions here, we don't have specific answers to, but we can imagine that in the area specific topics that we would focus a consultant for, like the sort of analysis, build out, study, above and beyond reorganization of the bylaws, we would lean into that person for more robust community engagement. For the reorganization piece, it will be largely in-house town staff organizing forums, working with the zoning bylaw working group, whatever committees were involved, along with council. As we determine, as we move forward towards more of the contentious policy related items, those we may realize follow in a subsequent round of zoning changes. We may need someone like a Stantec to do more in-depth things. So it's just right now, there's a lot up in the air. This has just been unfolding. We just had a meeting a couple of hours ago with zoning bylaw working group, and we're still sort of sorting this through.
Yeah.
Well, so when we were looking at the different companies to help us with the master plan, there were a couple of them that had very strong community organizing backgrounds. I think we ought to look back at those organizations and see whether or not they have experience in organizing around changing a bylaw, because Tom's right. It could be that we have 20 people show up and then we get to the town meeting and they shut us down. So we don't want that to happen. And I think we really need to have a sophisticated communication strategy and somebody that actually knows how to work with large contentious crowds that are going to be, standing up and saying what they think. So I really feel like it's not like when we went for the bylaw rewrite, it said something very specific and it had pieces, but it was very specific. Now that we think we're going to do that for ourselves, why don't we try to find somebody who could be a mediator or somebody to help organize the process?
As I said at the working group today, I think we assume contentiousness far too much. And the example of the December town meeting came up, and I think that the December town meeting was a lack of proper education. And I think the forums that we're envisioning are going to be far different than town meeting. We're not going to be presenting a fait accompli and say, what do you think? It's going to be a give and take, because nobody on the working group wants to go forward with substantive changes like to the dimensional part of the bylaw, as an example, without a lot of feedback beforehand. And so even if the forum is more than 100 people and it's in one of the bigger auditoriums in town, it's going to be far more debate, Q&A, exchange of ideas than town meeting allows for. And that's what we're envisioning to happen. And then by the time the town meeting comes along, when the actual things are put forward for vote, all of that vetting, all of that debate should be gone, you hope, and that, there's a consensus in the town has gelled around the proposal that's ultimately going to be made. That's
well, my feeling is the zoning board, the zoning bylaw working group shouldn't be the people leading those meetings. You're going to be the people presenting. And I mean, really.
Well, you know what,
it's not.
Okay, I'm just
I agree
putting
with
my
Tom.
2 cents in.
Oh, I get it. I know, and I get it. And there's I mean, to me, the difference between somebody who MCs a meeting and who presents it, I think is minor, but it's an assumption that the working group and the members of it can't be objective in the way they approach the public with this.
I'm not saying that. You're going to be presenting it. You can't run a meeting and present it at the same time.
Well,
Lauren,
all right,
and
whatever. We'll
Sorry.
figure that out.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I've heard what the chair is saying. I understand the need, and I've always stressed the need for good communication. So I will include this in our planning forward. At this time, I don't think we need to figure it out tonight, is my.
yeah, exactly.
But it
That's
sounds
fine.
like progress. I think everyone's worrying about the important things. And honestly, the town meeting zoning changes, if everybody's done their homework, then that's the easy part. There's always going to be somebody who's objecting. You rarely get a unanimous vote, but you never know. And that's gratifying when you do. Well, thank you for
Okay,
the update.
so Lauren, would you like to have a time to give us an update?
Sure. I really, I don't have anything incredibly substantial for you. Since our last discussion, the Affordable Housing Trust met today. They have the article moving forward to annual town meeting. A reminder that annual town meeting is May 2nd. It's a Monday. It's going to be at the high school auditorium. Please, everyone mark your calendars. There are no zoning articles moving forward, which is important, but as residents in the town, I encourage that you go. And then that's really it. Affordable Housing Steering Committee will be meeting shortly in the next coming weeks. They're really right now kind of focusing on their next fiscal year goal planning. And Harbor Committee had another successful forum, the second out of their 3-part series earlier this week. And more to come. I'll keep you updated as we have things unfolding. Cassandra, who assistant town planner, has been settling in really nicely. Tomorrow is actually marks 1 month with us. And she's been really doing great work supporting the zoning board, Harbor Committee, et cetera, helping me and helping a lot of our process improvements in the planning permits and inspections department, and helping us work planning for spring grant cycles. So that's in a nutshell the other things going on besides planning board applications, which we have many of. And then the last thing I'll leave for you is the next meeting, April 27th. We have 8 items on the agenda. We're going to try to do our best for time management and just prepare. It's going to be a long one.
It's got a lot of large
How
house
do those 8 break
reviews.
down? How do those 8 break down in the type of permits?
1 A&R, 1 common drive. We
that
have
one, the same one that we've done.
5 large house reviews.
Black Horse Lane.
Okay.
And then actually, one of the large house reviews is a double special permit for ledge removal. It's actually a quite small piece that you'll find, but I'll get all that information recirculated to you. I did send it. I think I may have sent it already, but if not, I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay, anything not anticipated 48 hours in advance?
Maybe Laura, Woody today in the zoning working group asked, when can we get back to live meetings? And Lauren gave us an update. So maybe for the rest of the board here, because I mean, I'm with Woody, I'm itching to get back to live meetings, but.
Yes. So I'll give you an update. I'll admit it's a bit nebulous because I don't have a clear answer right now. At this point, we're in a sort of a holding pattern. The select board really enjoys the transparency of having all of these meetings recorded and accessible online. So we know when we go back, we don't want to go back to straight up in person. They want to be able to have the virtual aspect. There's 2 levels of virtual. You either have virtual access where people can watch from home and, live, or you have virtual that is actually interactive, where you have people being able from home to ask questions and participate, which is a whole nother level of complexity for us in terms of staffing that, making sure we had the right equipment to do that. The other problem is in terms of the virtual capacity that we have 2 cameras in town, one's at the schools and one is at the Wilcox Commons. The problem with this is just sheer logistics. At this point, as long as you have enough Zoom accounts, you can have any infinite number of meetings on the same night. For example, most Tuesday nights, we have at least 3, not 4 competing time meetings. For all of those to be hybrid functioning, we simply can't do them all at Wilcott. So the question is, it's like, do we have some remain virtual only, some do some sort of hybrid? I'm not sure what the answer is yet, but it's going to be like a volleying and some sort of bottleneck just based on the capabilities that we have. I did ask today about grant funding to see if we could get more of these OWL things. And I don't know which rooms we put them in, perhaps library. I don't know what's available, but we're working on a solution. But that's sort of why it's so complicated and that we can't just flip the switch.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grady, and then I have something to report.
I think we ought to make a motion to adjourn so we can sleep on all this important information. And
Okay,
come
I
back
just want to report on the noise.
Detailed, Amy, well, I'm just finishing wrapping up my speech.
Sorry.
So we come back bright-eyed, bushy-tailed to the next meeting. The new iterations were all full of good and happy ideas about working with Lauren so we can plan these meetings maybe in together. It'd be nice to see everybody in person. So that's what I think. These long meetings are.
Great. Okay, the last thing to say is that I compiled 11 towns worth of noise ordinances, and they're all over the place, but they do have intentions to have some level of regulation about sounds, and they do use instrumentation to determine that. My inability to do anything further without DEP arose, and so I contacted DEP, and I'm hoping to hear back from them in terms of how they manage towns that are asking these questions. And so I'll report back on that as I continue on it. All right, Mr. Grady, was that a motion?
Yes, it is. Does
I
anybody
will
want to second it?
second, I will second that.
All right,
Eloquent motion.
Mr. Brewer,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.